Oh, hi. Good evening. Thank you for joining me, whether it's now or in the future when you're listening to this on replay. I thought that it would be a really nice thing to do just to say hello from my studio and let you know what goes on here. Have a little chat to you as well, because it's been 10 years since I've been here in the studio, and also 10 years since I've been running some courses called Creative Me. So I wanted to give you today, this evening, a little insight into my studio, my working process, and answer any questions that you've got as well. Because I'm really, really grateful for everybody who takes an interest in my paintings and in the workshops that I do. And I know that a lot of them get sent, all across Britain, and I'm really lucky abroad as well. And I know that a lot of you can't actually get here. So I am opening this studio from next weekend. I think weekend after. We open then till October, over the weekends. But I know a lot of you can't get down. Some of you have visited, and it's always been really lovely to see you all. Hi, Paula. Hello. Anybody, if you want to comment there on the side, I'm trying to keep an eye on the comments, and I'll answer any questions that you've got if I can see them, because I have to zoom up to you guys, put my glasses on, see the comments. Yeah, so thanks for joining me. It's nice to welcome you to my studio here. This is in West Wales, a place called Newcastle Emlyn. We're about 12, 15 miles from the coast, west of Wales. And the M4, if you came down that and you headed straight to the end of the M4, and then you kept going about 30 miles, that's where you'd find us. We'd be about there. Beautiful part of the world. Hello, Fiona. Hi. Nice to see you. So here we are, my studio. Yep, I'm so lucky to be here. I've come in this evening. I've been out at a gallery, a cooperative that I'm a member of, stewarding there. So I've come in and I've lit the fire, and I've tried to tidy up a bit, but we're not that tidy at the moment. I just want to sort of pick the laptop up if I can and walk you around a little bit. And you'll see my very high tech, where my laptop is at the moment, or was on that box there, box of canvases. So this bit that you can see here in front of me, and by the way, I hope this little talk and little introduction to my studio is going to be of interest not only to artists but also to the people who like my paintings, so they can actually see where it goes on, that it's a real artist here doing it, making these paintings. So this is my main working desk here that you can see, essential little platform there for tea and coffee. Those are my notes for tonight, what I'd like to talk about. That's a little open copy of a book that I wrote several years ago, which I'm sort of going to be using for a little bit of a prompt for myself. Over here then is my slightly bored doggy and my lovely fire. So that's a sofa as well. I'd say that's an essential part of the studio setup, because when I'm sat over here on the sofa, and I hope you don't get too giddy being walked around like this, when I'm sat there, can you imagine? I can look over at paintings that are in progress on the easels. I've got several easels on the go there. Can you hear me all right, by the way? Fiona or Paula, could you just give me a thumbs up if the sound is okay? I assume it is. Yeah, so I can sit on the sofa and I can look at my paintings, because, painting is a funny old business. There's a lot of work goes on in your head and, in your mind, while you're not actually putting paint on canvas. And a good way to do that is to actually just sit down and look at the things, because they need that thought process. The way I work, and I'll show you in a moment, thanks Fiona, the initial layers, they're quite busy, there's a lot going on in them, and the paint can be put on quite loosely and without a lot of consideration. You know, consideration can be given to the color schemes and some ideas you might have in your head, but the initial layers go on very, very loosely, and it's a process of refinement then and judgment, and that actually takes some, thanks Paula, some sitting back and allowing the painting to actually speak to you. I'll just put my glasses on so I can see that comment. Hello, Patty. Thank you. Hi. So yeah, it's as I said, you know, the initial layers, they're splashing, they're going on. Let me find one that's sort of initial layers for you, and you can see what I mean. Oh, come have a look behind here with me. This is certainly a work in progress studio. So the ones on the easel here are kind of finished. Well, Whitby's definitely finished there. That one in bubble wrap, not so sure yet. But behind here is, I guess, something in the region of 40 paintings half done or just started. So when I said I wanted to show you one that was in the very splashy stage and quite loose, this would be a good example, I think. I'll just drag this one out and hope there's no big spiders hiding behind it, because sometimes they like to hide in the back of those canvases. So yeah, I probably do have about 40 paintings on the go at a time, and I'll decide maybe which one that I want to finish, you know, by Albert. It'll either be there's an exhibition coming up that's in a particular place, and I'll think, oh, I need some paintings maybe of Tenby or somewhere, or it will be that one just catches my eye, and I like to keep them all visual like that in my, you know, awareness is the word. Sorry about this, I'll just put the dog in the other room. He decided he wants to play with his toy. Come on, puppy. Out you go. Yeah. Come on, in you go. I'm back. So yeah, keeping them in your mind, just out of the, you know, in my field of vision as I walk through here, which I do every day because this studio is actually attached to my kitchen. That's my house there, my kitchen in the background. So I see them every day, they're there, you know. So even though they're quite a few years old, some of them, they're just sort of ruminating there, cogitating, I'm thinking about them. And suddenly, you know, something will have inspired me, or I will have got some new paint or some new colors that I want to use, and then I'll be able to get on with them. You know, they're working away in the background of your mind without you even thinking about it a lot of the time. So here's quite a splashy one. It has started to sort of take on, you can't really see that, sorry, move around, there we are. The ideas of, you know, a landscape and a seascape and some hills in the background. But I'll just show you this one for a more splashy one, a bit more abstract. This is one of my latest ones that I'm working on. Okay, it's quite big. These are, that's 120 centimeters by a meter that way. But this is one that I'm literally just cleaning my brush on effectively, you know, thinking what color to go on there, what shapes do I want, what's working in terms of darks and lights, what's starting to come out in the painting. Not even sure which way up it will go. I'm certainly just liking it around at the moment, and I'm looking at it. This one underneath here then is coming to the end of its process. This is actually a commission for somebody, and it's going to be of a lovely place called Barafundle Bay, which is in Pembrokeshire. So now I'm at the stage where I'm going to be finishing that off, and I think I'll do a little painting demo on there in the next few minutes. Just maybe talk a little bit about my process. Let me just check, put my glasses on. Hello, everybody. Hi, Julie. Hello. If you've got any questions, pop them up there, and I will try and see. Hey, John. It's my lovely husband. No questions from Johnny. So yeah, so the process, as I've just been sort of outlining to you, it starts very, very messy, and then gradually the painting will get refined. This one started very messy, very loose, and it's gradually being refined. It's very easy to work in this way if you're using acrylics, and I use a variety of acrylic paints. I also use watercolors, but mainly for my initial sketches, and I'll show you some of these lovely little sketchbooks in a minute and explain why they're so very, very, very important. But back to acrylics, I use them, and I like to use these fluid acrylics. I also use acrylics you've probably seen and heard of, these heavy body ones in tubes. So they're a little bit thicker. They've got a binder in them which makes them thick. So they're like a pigment, and then they have a binder in them that will make them quite thick. The ones I like to use are these things called fluid acrylics. Particularly fond of the ones by Golden. Sorry, I think I'm advertising. I'm not really, but it's just a very nice apron. These are by Golden, and I just love them because they're fluid. So you can build up many, many thin layers of paint with them. And if, like I'm going to put on here now, there's a boat needs to go on here and some seals. So if I was going to do that, you can see this is blue, it's quite solid, but if I use, and you can see I'm using some chalk here, this is kind of my secret weapon. I'm going to put on maybe, you know, a boat in here. I'll chalk it on first so that I can get it in the right position, and if I'm not happy then with where that outline is, I just wipe that off. So I'm just using a bit of tissue paper, the blue paper from Builders Yards, just to wipe off them. And this is so lovely working with acrylics like this, because once that layer's dried, you know, you can put on what you want and play about with where your shapes are going to be, you know, what you want on there. It's a bit like, I think it's a bit like, I don't know if any of you remember fuzzy felt from when you were younger. I used to love that, where you could move the shapes around and you could put the things where you want them. You see, so if I was going to have that boat, I'm not quite sure where that's going to be. I've certainly got to fit it in, but it might have to go there in the foreground. We'll see. I could certainly say I would be putting maybe, let's say, some fish in here like that. Let me show you now, because what I wanted to demonstrate is that if you use an opaque acrylic paint, which would be either one of your earth colours, sort of these chromium colours tend to be quite opaque, as does anything that's got white in it, because white's always going to be quite an opaque colour. So if I used, or black of course, yeah, let me just think. Let's use some of this white. I'll just grab a brush. There we go. A little bit of water. Right. This is the other thing about maybe how I work that you might find a little unusual. I don't know, it's just my way of doing it. I don't tend to mix colours at all. I like to use them directly out of the bottle and mix them on the canvas, because it gives a little bit more variety in your mix, rather than mixing a solid lot of colour up and having one colour as if it would just pour out of the tube like that. If you mix it on the canvas, let me demonstrate now with one of these bits. Say we're going to have this circle here, yeah, and it's going to be, say, like a boy from a boat, yeah, or let's say we have this fish as well, yeah, there we go. But if I mix the colour in there with the white, it's easier to get. I'm looking for a red now, which of course I haven't got out. It's going to be easier to mix a nice variety of interesting colour when on the canvas, rather than trying to mix little bits up on a palette and put it on there. The other reason I like to use it straight out of the tube is because I never know how much I'm going to use of it. And I don't like to put a lot of paint out, because you can't get it back in the bottle once you've got it out there. And of course, it, you know, it can be quite an expensive business, can the paint. So that would go on there like that. The fish now, I'm going to do him a dark blue. This is one of my favourite paints here. I love it. It's by Acrylic, which is a brand called Schminke. And this is their Prussian blue. Now, Prussian blue is one of my favourite colours. It's a real intense dark staining blue, and it's one I love to use for whenever I do any shading, any shadows like that. But it's also, Prussian blue is a funny one. You know, you can get it in several brands and varieties, you know, like De La Rowney or Golden or Schminke. And Prussian blue will be a different colour in each of those brands. So the way to find out if you've sort of used, say, a colour in Golden and you want to either make it yourself or you want to find it in another brand is to put your glasses on and to have a look at the back of the bottle of paint. Now, not all paints will have this information. It tends to be the more you pay for your paint, the more information you'll get, you know, the more it'll tell you about the product. So on the back of here, it will actually tell you the makeup of the paint. And I'm just looking for the exact numbers here. So this is Phthalo Blue Green shade, which is, there's an international number for paints, and this is a PB15-4. It's also got the light fastness there. So if you wanted to get this exact shade, you could look for another paint that had PB15:4 on it, and you'd be able to find it. It also will tell you what on the back here, to try to get underneath the colour, the pigments that are actually used there. The pigment is the PB15:4, which is copper thiacyanine. So yeah, that point I was making there is not all paints are created equal. You know, if you get a Prussian blue and it's in this one, the Schminke range, this is the one I really love and I use. If I got it in the Golden range, it's a lovely colour, is their Prussian blue, but it's not as deep and as juicy as this one from Schminke, so this is the one I like. So going back to what I was demonstrating here about my painting process, and hello everybody who's joining, it's nice to see you. Oh, hang on, I'm just seeing some more comments here. Love the fuzzy felt. I know, that's how I paint. Chalk patty, yeah, it's a great one, and you'll see in a minute I can rub that off. Hi Mike, hey Tracy, and yes Julie, Prussian blue. Well, I don't know if you've tried this one, the Schminke one, but yeah. And again, this is a fluid, you know, they do it in a heavy body, you know, in a tube, but I like the fluid one of it. So I'm just waiting for paint to dry here, and then I can show you why I like that chalk so much. Right, just put a bit of white onto there. So I was explaining that I don't tend to put colours out on palettes ever. I just put it straight onto the canvas. Even when I'm working on these more abstract ones, I tend to just drip a bit on and then pull it about with the brush. So there we go, mixing it on there. Yeah. And that's why this apron is so messy as well, because I'm got quite a bad habit of cleaning my brush off on the apron rather than on. Let's just pop a bit of that into there for shadow. Yeah. Right, we'll let that dry for a minute now. I'm loving this. This is like, you know, when I was little, Blue Peter used to be on a lot. I don't even know whether that's still on now, but it was always, they were demonstrating things, weren't they? And it would be, here's one I made earlier, and we'll put that one aside. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to welcome you all into the studio here, because as I was saying, you know, whether you're an artist and you're interested in paint, or you're a collector and you buy my work, I feel it's nice for me to give a little bit and to show you a little bit of my process, you know, and let you know how I get on here. So just to recap then, you know, start off a bit splishy sploshy, and then using my sketchbooks, I start to apply the design. And sketchbooks, these are so important, you know, because I love the method that I teach. It helps people really start their painting, so there's no fear of starting, which I know a lot of people have had in the past. So the method that I teach and I use myself, as I showed you, it's about just splashing things about like that. But then it's how do you start to make it your own? You know, how do you start to get your own voice with your paintings? Well, the essence of that is sketchbooks and scrapbooks, a mix of the two I use. Sketchbooks. These are this is one of mine, France, 2015. So I tend to just carry a sketchbook with me whenever I can, and it's got little bits there of things that I've visited, you know. And what I find with a sketchbook, you know, I can open this up now and I can look in here and I'm immediately back to that day, you know, and that place. And when you've got a sketchbook and a scrapbook, which I'll show you in a minute, you're never going to be without an idea to inspire you. You know, you're always going to know what to do next with that painting, where to start, where to go with it. But what I wanted to show you was this. Okay, the little sketch, but what I like to do is I carry around with me a little mount that is this shape, and I paint inside that mount, so that then when I've taken the mount off, you've got a nice outline of the painting. And if I haven't got a mount with me, I use some low-tack tape just to tape around there. These are all done with watercolor and gouache. Just exploring simple lines and designs. Generally, they're places where I've just sat for a moment and taken it in, you know, taken in the atmosphere, and I also then put the date on and sign it. But the date's important to me because I can go back through my digital photographs then and I can find the photo references that I took from there. So if I decided to do that as a painting, I'd have the sketch and I'd also have the photographic references. But sketches are very important to me as well because they really help me define what's been important to me in that place, what's hit me about the place, whether it's been the colors or the flowers or just the little window. You know, with a photo, it's easy to go and take a lot of photographs of beautiful places. But when you look at the photos, it's quite hard to remember just what it was that was important to you about that place. You know, if you can do a sketch, even a tiny little one, you know, oh, that's quite nice. Full moon moves. I've forgotten about that one. It's quite nice just to do a little sketch, you know, and I was even thinking about buying a new handbag today just so I could fit a littler sketchbook in because these are quite big, some of them. So it can really take you straight back to that, you know, and you're never going to be without ideas then. I'm just looking under here. So let me, showing you around my studio here. Let me just show you my workbench. This is the most amazing thing, and it was made for me. And it's got drawers in it. I hope you can see this. Those are big pull-out drawers there. So in here, all sorts of like sketchbooks, paperwork, things like that. Under here, some more paints and things and more sketchbooks. Here's just where I put things that I'm sort of using for paintings that are ongoing. I'm looking around the other side now. Sorry if you feel a bit dizzy. Here we are. This is what we call my scrapbook. So when I started teaching these Creative Me workshops, I'm just saying at the beginning of this, what I'm doing now this year here is celebrating 10 years of having this studio and gallery open and 10 years of teaching the Creative Me workshops. People said to me, I was saying to people, bring along your sketchbook, and no, I haven't got a sketchbook. And I was like, well, okay, bring along a scrapbook, you know, just put into that scrapbook what inspires you. You know, print out things from Pinterest or from websites or from Instagram, but print them out, stick them in your sketchbook, and actually write next to them who did it, give the credit for that, but also what inspires you about it. Really take it apart. You know, is it the line? Is it the design? Is it the colors? And if you've got a scrapbook like this is my one of floral designs, and your sketchbooks, you're really never going to be without inspiration, and you're going to pull something out of those that's quite uniquely you, you know, uniquely you, because you'll be attracted to a certain type of color or color use or a way of lines that people might use, and you can adapt those and move those on and make them yourself, you know, make it into your own art. So yeah, here's my little scrapbook, and he's my favorite artist of mine, Esther MacLeod. Some of you might know her. She's a super good artist, and I love the way that she does her bits and pieces, her seed heads and some birds there, and there's another little picture of some seed heads. So what I've done here is I've actually written down, I love the way she's used the blue, you know, in the background of the flowers there, and it tones with the sea. And I love the way that she's done the grass lighter. So it's the contrast that really interested me. Now, by printing out artists' work like that and really analysing what it is that draws you to it, you can start to incorporate those kind of ideas into your own work. Not by directly copying, but by learning from what other artists have done. You know, and this is how we all learn. There's nothing wrong with it. But the trick with it is to pull enough of your own self into it and be confident enough in your own abilities to do that, so that it becomes genuinely your work. And that's where the real interest starts. That's where the real excitement is, and where that flow that people talk about comes from. You know, when you can just start to paint and you can just keep painting and you can just enjoy it and you know exactly where you're going with it. But of course, all that does take time and it does take practice. But once you get that excitement, you know, that you might feel when you've put some blue on and you put a bright flash of pink next to it, you know, it just rocks your creative world and it just keeps you going and you can have such a good time. This should be just about dry. It's a bit cold in here tonight because I work in it's a conservatory, but I've got it's nicely set up, but I didn't get in that long ago, so I didn't get a chance to light the fire. There it is, just lit now. I work on several paintings at a time, so I've got one easel there, which I've just taken the painting off, and I've got another one, a big one over there at the shoulder. That one there, yeah, two there, two big easels there. The one I work on, so that's the work in progress will be there, so they're very much in my mind and I can just work one to the other. This is my main easel here, and surprise, surprise, it's not a massive expensive thing. It is £22 worth of De La Rowney desk easel. Look at it, it's beautiful. It's just the right height on this surface here where I can just keep all my paints to hand. So I tend to be working on a big painting like this, and I'll just have the colours out that I'm using with that painting, and then they'll all get put back at the end of the week over there or in these drawers. That's all heavy body acrylics in there. And here, that's all my fluid acrylics. And then up there, in the dark a bit, sorry, is pencils and that kind of thing. Under here, that's my oil pastels in there. I know it's a lot of paints, it's a lot of stuff, but I've been doing this for a long time, so it does build up. Yeah. So yeah, you know, little desk easel. One of the things that I think is really, really important for artists, and that really started me on my journey and my career, was having a space that I could leave everything out. So not only can you then come back to it and you can think, oh, I'll just do 5 minutes on that, because, you know, we are all so busy. We're really busy. And it is hard to prioritize your creative time. We'll talk about that again in just a minute. But if you can leave your stuff out, even in the corner of a room, a little table, just leaving your painting out and a few paints, it not only means that you can just come and you can do 5 minutes as you're passing, but it also means it's in your mind and it's out there. Every time you walk past it, the painting's in your mind, and it will be speaking to you on a subtle level. You know, your brain will be processing what needs to be done next. So, you know, if you're thinking about doing some painting and having difficulties prioritizing the time or getting stuck into it, I say the first thing to do is see, really, can you get a corner of your, you know, corner of a room somewhere, but preferably not one right out of the way, you know, upstairs, preferably a little bit of the dining room table, you know, anywhere that you can see it and that you can just do 5 minutes while you're passing. But seriously, this is the best thing. They're not expensive. It's a completely, it folds down. I don't know if it will now because it's got too much paint on it, but it just falls flat. And that then, when you're standing up next to it, is a good place to work. It's movable, you know, you can hold a big canvas. This is 80 by 80 centimeters, that one. So as you can see here, I've got this set up for working. This desk has been made specially to be hip height for me, so that I'm standing straight when I'm working at it. And that's another really good tip as well. I always work standing up because there's a couple of reasons. There's more than a couple of reasons. One is that it's much better for you. It's better for you to stand up and work. You can breathe more, you know, you can move about more. You're not sat squidged up, and you can actually breathe. And breathing is so important to creativity and painting. Oh, so much I could say about that. Breathing is so important because, oh, where do I start with this? Now then, I'm going to get one of these bent up canvases here. This came through the post the other day. They're replacing it, but it had a hole right in it when it got here. Sometimes they do. So breathing's important because as you are creating, as you're painting, you will come across things in your mind that tell you things like, this is no good. Why are you even bothering? This paint's so expensive. I don't want to put too much of it on there. Oh, my teacher told me I was no good. All those kind of negative self-talk. You'll also come across some positive self-talk. Now, those are the things you really need to start paying attention to and hanging on to, you know, and really acknowledging them. It's so easy. And this, I'm going to put this up here and talk to this a minute. There we are. And then I'll come back to breathing. Promise I will. When I started painting a long time ago, what is it that drives you? You know, you get that little bit that works well, don't you? That goes okay, and you just want to repeat it. You want to repeat it and make it happen again, and that's good. But there's also all that stuff in your brain that's about, that you've taken on about what an artist is, you know, how you're never going to be any good at it, that it's for other people. And when I actually came to write my book, and this isn't a plug for my book, but this is it. That's been around a few years now. It's based on the workshops that is. When I came to write that book, what I realized is this, okay? And I wrote that book really because people were coming to visit me here and saying, I wish I could paint, but I can't. I'm no good. You know, I used to really enjoy it, but I know I'd never be any good at it. So I wrote this book. And as I was writing it, I realized it's not about painting skills. What I know about putting paint on could be taught in the course of a weekend. What I know about being an artist, that takes a lot longer now. So I split it into three. I said the top of the iceberg here, this bit here, It's not a very good colour, that one, for doing it with. That top of the iceberg, that bit, is the painty bit. Oh, there's this other one. This one had a hole in it as well. We'll leave that there. Right. That's better to see, isn't it? So this bit here is the paint, yeah? The how-to of acrylic paint. So the technical ability, how the paint goes on, how it dries, how you mix the colours, you know, how to put them on, what brushes to use, what canvases to use. This is a couple of days' work. Learning to mix the colours, how to put them on subtly, how to put them on to really convey what you want to convey. That's a lifetime's work. That's ongoing. I love learning. I'm still learning. I'm fortunate to be part of a group called Connected Artists with a lady called Alice Sheridan. And I had, we do a live review of ongoing paintings sometimes. And I had this one of mine looked at the other day, and yeah, I learned some stuff. It's brilliant. You know, we're all learning, all constantly learning, and it's how it should be. The second bit here, and the third bit, the third bit, this is the most important. This is like the weight of the iceberg, the real bottom bit, and this is what's going on inside your mind. This is what your brain is telling you about being an artist, about your ability to paint, about your creative process, about creativity in general, all those things. And it's about becoming aware of what your thoughts are and not being harsh with them or challenging them, but just picking them up and being aware of them and saying, yep, okay, and then trying to replace them with something that's a bit more helpful. This is the hard bit. This is the hard bit. Yeah, this is the thoughts. It's ongoing, but it's so important as the paint. This bit is a process that's ongoing, and we're always learning about it. All of us are, you know, and we need to keep an eye on it. So breathing helps with that, because you will get to the point where you're painting away and it's all going happy, you know, lovely colours are going on there, and you'll suddenly get a feeling that, you know, there's not right. So it's important that you can take a step back, know that it's normal, recognise what it is. Now, for me, when those feelings occur, they're usually about the boundaries that have been set up, things that are going on in my mind. Oh, I can't paint like that. I don't do that. I don't know how to do that. Those two colours don't go together. You know, it could be anything, but it's a real clue as well, and it's a real gift if you can recognise those, and then you can gently lean into them and find out what they're about. Hi, Peter. Nice to see you. Hi, Kwai. Hi, Julia. Can you show us the painting over the fire? I can indeed. Thanks, Sally Ann. Glad you like that idea. Nice to see you all. Welcome to my studio, you know, winter nights. Painting over the fire. Here we go. That's a winter painting. I was speaking to an artist friend of mine, Sue, today, and she was saying that her paintings in the winter tend to be darker. That's true, isn't it? Because we're inspired, well, I'm inspired by what's around me. You know, I'm inspired by the seasons. That's one cold winter. But I was loving just exploring how minimal I could get with paintings, you know, just how little line, design, colour you'd need in a painting to still have it make sense as a painting, you know. And that was a very interesting series of paintings, but now I am exploring something new again. So I was saying, yes, so the paint is the process bit, the thoughts are all there. This middle bit, this is of what is of interest to professional artists wanting to sort of move on in their careers. And this is about the business of art. And this is about it does link into this very much, the thoughts and the paint very much. But it's all about how you put yourself out there, what you do, your social media, how you sell. You know, it's about, yeah, it's about actually being a professional in a lot of ways like that. So that all, for me, this is my idea of what being an artist is. When I wrote the book here, the iceberg had just the two parts, the thoughts, the psychology of it was this big bottom bit here. But I needed to put in another little layer there because I realized that was a separate layer to the painting. That's about the business, the buzz, yeah, it's about the buzz. It's about the business of art. I want to do a bit of painting now. Hey, has anybody got any questions? Let me see. Lee. Hey, Lee. Do you know what? I've never seen Bob Ross. There's something about his hair, says she. There's something about his hair that I don't know. I don't know. No, I've not seen Bob Ross. No. It's like I've never seen Star Wars either. Maybe I should be made to sit down and... Okay. Let me just see. What shall we do? We have to look in our books, don't we? Shall we do this one? That was quite nice. I was enjoying these, the colour schemes you see around the muscles, the mules there. And this is odd when you're doing it back to front. The lemon of the lemon. Yeah, okay. Let's just, here's one I didn't, these are canvases I've just had on the floor that have been knocking around and waiting for me to do something with. So this one seems like a very appropriate one to put this sketch onto. So I could have just, that's interesting, just spilled some red paint there. I could have just done a splishy, sploshy background, but I think we'll stick with this. So what I'm going to do is use a bit of that chalk again, and I'm looking at this sort of sketch, and there was another one, wasn't there, which was Midnight Mules that I quite liked. Can't talk about minimalist. That was my 2015 minimalist stage. I go through phases of either wanting to be quite minimal like this in paintings, or really, really, really busy, you know, with everything in them, like that Whitby one, which is, where's that? There, that one behind there. These two have been painted at the same time. So I do think it's fine for artists to explore styles, you know, and to keep developing and to have different approaches. Okay. So this is what I'm using as just my inspiration, just a starter. But what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the placement of this for a start. So I don't want it right in the middle, and I don't really want it right down at the bottom. So kind of where I had it in the middle there was a, you know, in the top sort of third was a nice sort of bit. So yeah, I'm going to go with that. So let me get that wet cloth again. Just checking out. Lucy. Hi, Anne. I will, yeah. She's done it, yeah. Hey, Julie. Thank you. I'm going to like that. I just feel like Star Wars would be just too much of my time, you know? And that brings me to something I did want to mention. One of the questions that I get quite a lot from people is, you know, they say, I'd love to paint, but I just haven't got the time. Where have I got the time? And I say to them, well, you know, like, it's pretty obvious, really. It's a question of priorities, isn't it? You prioritize what's important to you. And yes, sure, you've maybe got a job, you've maybe got kids, you've got care responsibilities, you know, you've got 101 other things taking up your time. But I say, you know, even if you spent half an hour a day, 30 minutes a day painting, prioritizing your creativity, your sketchbooks or your painting or any kind of thing like that, you know, that would be feed your creativity, you know, you're still going to be spending 23.5 hours prioritizing things above that. So you know, it's a no-brainer, really. Stop watching telly, stop doing housework. Those were the first two things I did when I realised I didn't have enough time for painting. It's harsh, but true. When I stopped doing housework, it was because there was 4 of us living in this house and there was 4 of us making a mess. So it made sense to me that it should be 4 of us cleaning it up. Didn't make sense to the other 3 people. Right, so again, I'm using the fluid acrylics, and white, like I said, is going to be quite opaque. Now, the other reason, I'm flitting about a bit here, but an artist's mind. The other reason that standing up working is a good idea is because you can step back. You can step back. That's essential. Stepping back is really essential. If you're working sitting down, you can't see what you're doing. Not only have you got the perspective wrong, because that bit, that side of you is going to be elongated, this bit's closer, but you know, stepping back not only gives you a little bit of exercise, a few steps, but also it means you can see what's actually going on. And the nearer the painting gets to completion, the more time you're going to be spent step back away from it, or I would be, you should be. That's why that sofa's there as well, for those of you that didn't see the sofa. There it is. So, you know, people might come in and visit me here and find me sitting on the sofa, but that's work. And when I have the workshops here, the weekend ones especially, you know, it gets to that last quarter of the workshop, the last afternoon, and I have to tell people to get away from their paintings, because as paintings near completion, you need to spend more time away from them. When you're first starting and you're sploshing it all about, you can spend a lot of time right up against it, sploshing it all about like that. But when you get nearer the end of a painting, you have to spend the majority of your time stepped away from it, because it'll only need 1 or 2 little finishing things to finish it off. And if you are spending your time like this, still frantically painting away, you're going to paint over something that's really working or doesn't need adjusting. Yeah. And it's hard to get that through to people who, you know, are paying very good money to come and paint with me. You know, they might think, well, what am I doing sitting down? I should actually be painting. But so much of the painting actually goes on in here and here. So it was David Hockney that said painting is involves 3 things. It's your hand, it's your eye, and it's your heart. You know, part of the process of painting is about getting your mind out of it, you know, taking yourself out of it, not interfering with it. It's a fine balance, you know, but it's something that you might call it intuition, you know, you might call it being in the zone, you might call it that creative spark. It's got to be given some room as well, but it's about getting that in balance. So the more you actually practice the bones of it, you know, those basics of paint that I was explaining, the top of the iceberg, you get to know those automatically. And then it's easier just to let your hand and your eye and your heart coordinate. So that's some white fluid paint I'm just putting on there. I'm going to have to let that one dry. This bit you see here, that's just chalk, and that'll come off with another wiping. Let's let that dry. I'll just get my secret weapon. Bear with. Gone. Where are you? You don't want to come and play. Right, here we are. Nearly there. Right, hairdryer. Want to get this dry. So I won't be able to talk too much while I'm doing this, but that's better. So hairdryer to dry the layers of acrylic paint, because when you're painting like this, like I do in layers, when you get to know the paint, you'll know which, how quickly it dries, how dry you need it for the next effect that you want. Because acrylic paint's brilliant at making different effects. You know, if you put paint on when another layer on when it's slightly damp, you can get some lovely draggy effects. If you put it on when it's wet on wet, you can get some real nice watercolory effects. If you put it on really thick and chunky, and sometimes with some added things called mediums, you can get really thick, chunky oil paint effects. But for me, I needed that background dry so I could then chalk on it and show you the next stage of it. I'm just going to check here. Hi, Julia. Hi, Lee. Lee, how do I manage to work between the two styles, picturesque and abstract? Oh, yeah. I work with both together, and sometimes, and I don't think I'm looking around for an example. Sometimes they'll merge, you know, and there'll be like quite an abstract background, and then there'll be more detail in the foreground. I think essentially all these ones, you know, like this, they tend, and like this, they tend to start off more as abstracts. There's one behind here now, and I'm not quite sure whether I like that one as an abstract yet, or whether I'll paint over it into something like this. So, this is a good example of like a halfway one. This one. You know, it started off very, very abstractly, and then I've put motifs on top, you know, things that have interested me and what I've wanted to express. So, in the workshops that I teach, all the paintings start out like this. It's just a lovely free way of putting whatever you feel like putting on there. In terms of actually showing them to people, I've found that quite tricky, only because to have two like Instagram accounts or two Facebook accounts or, you know, two websites, that's been a bit interesting, but I'm in the process of working through it. So I have got a separate Instagram account in my married name, which is Helen Milton Artist. So the abstracts, they just go on there, and this Helen Elliott account on Facebook, I tend to put everything in because I like the feedback from people. You know, I like people to know what I'm working on. It's great. It's really good. Can you move the machine so we can see the canvas you work at? Which machine? Oh, there we are. That one. Thanks, Julia. Thank you. Hi, Kerry. Your son is studying me in primary school. He's only 6. Oh, say hello to him for me. Yeah, is he in bed now? Or can he come and say hi? Hello, Bron. How are you? Follow up. Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Much appreciated. Right. So what I've done is I've just put a thin layer of fluids, and for anybody who didn't hear earlier, I did explain a bit of a difference between the fluids and the heavy body. There's also another acrylic I use. I won't be using it tonight, but I'll just show you it. And it's called High Flow. And listen to this. Ooh. That's actually, it's a very, very thin paint, but it's a super high pigment. So there's as much pigment in that as there is in these, the fluids, and there's more pigment in those than there is in these, because these heavy bodies have got more binder in. So when people ask me, how do you get the, you know, those colors, you know, the colors that are so rich, it's because I put about 20 layers, 15, 20 layers on a painting of very transparent paint, but not paint that's been watered down at all. So, because if you watered it down, which you could, it'd still stick okay, but you'd lose some of the vibrancy of it, some of the amount of pigment, obviously, because you're watering it down. So I just use these paints, which very, very high pigment. So I'm looking at my picture here, my sketchbook, and I'm kind of liking this going on already. There's something about the moonlight mools of it, isn't there? And I'm going to use a bit of blue chalk on this. I've got a selection of chalks in here, including this, which was a wonderful discovery to me. This is, Johnny will have to tell me what it is. It's engineering chalk, and you can write on anything with it, metal or anything it writes on. It makes a real nice mark, and it's permanent. But I'm just using some blue on here, and I like the design of this. Quite often I find with sketches, and this is another really good reason for doing sketches, you've got 5-10 minutes to put some ideas down, and it makes you just pick out the elements that are important. And 9 times out of 10, the initial sketch that I do is the one that I'll use for the painting. Just looking to see where my other sketchbook is. Quite often, students who've studied with me, they'll see that I do several thumbnails before I finalise the paint, the design, because the design is so important. I could go into that, but I won't later. The design is so important, so I often do several thumbnail sketches, little ones, tiny little ones, just to get the design right with a big thick pen. And it's more often than not the first one, because if you're forced to do something quickly and in a small area, you can quite often get it right, rather than having a big sketchbook and a fine pen where you could spend half an hour on detail. You can lose that initial immediacy and vibrancy and correctness, really, of the sketch. So that's why I sometimes do go with my sketchbook works. They're there and they are, and I love mools. I've got some texture under here. No, you probably won't be able to see this. Let me bring this a bit closer. Maybe you can get it closer. Can you see at all texture just here? That's because as well as putting rough underlayers on, of paint just splashing about, I quite often like to add a bit of texture paste to it. This is, let me grab this here. This is the one I tend to use. Again, it's by my favourite company, honestly. I'm not being paid for this, I swear, it just happens. And this is something called fine pumice gel. It's an acrylic binder, so like an Evo stick, but much more sophisticated, with finely ground volcanic pumice in it. Yeah, and I mix that with a little bit of medium ground pumice as well, so it comes out quite randomly. And then when that's dry, I've added paint on the top. And now when I put my picture on it, it'll give some nice random effects, which is what I like. Sorry that you can't really see that chalk mark so well. Is that a bit better? Come closer. There. Yeah. Ooh, computer's adjusting its light, isn't it? Let's see there. Right, okay. I'm just going to carry on doing that. Whilst I pop that one away over there. That. So it's quite nice having some company here in the studio tonight. So as I said at the beginning, I kind of was thinking what to do this year, because I wanted to do some kind of celebration of 10 years of me teaching the Creative Me workshops, 10 years of this studio being open. And so I thought I'd just really do some live painting like this and go through, some of the teachings on Creative Me, So one of the questions that I get a lot from people is, and I'm just looking here, see if I have any more, is the fear of failure, you know, that stops them before they start, you know, and that then comes into this big bit in the middle of that pyramid I was showing you. Where's he gone? That the bottom bit of the pyramid, sorry, you know, about watching your thoughts, you know, and changing them if you can. So fear of failure, you know, what it's about defining that, but it's not really the fear of failure that anybody has. It is, isn't it? I'm sure you've found this, the truth. It's the fear of the fear itself. So once that's acknowledged, it can just put out the way and in its box. Because it's an imaginary construct, isn't it, that fear? You know, once we start to take it apart and really look at what it is it that we're actually afraid of? It's a piece of canvas and it's a bit of paint. That's all it is at the end of the day. Everything else is a construct in your mind. And so you might as well forget about it. The other thing is, people say to me, is they feel like they censor themselves. You know, they feel like they should be painting a pretty picture, or, you know, that they're going to be judged by it. It's about people's expectations then, isn't it, of you and what they think you should be painting. You know, really, if you want to paint massive industrial scenes, if that's what you find yourself constantly looking at in other artists' work, then that's what you should be painting. Do that. Doesn't matter what other people think, or here's the fact of it, what you think other people think. Because the truth of the matter is, we might think that we know what somebody's thinking about our painting, our work, or standing here talking like this. Fact of it is, I can never know what you're thinking. You might say, hey, great, that's really good. Oh, what is she on about? That's what you might say, but you know, what you're actually thinking, I don't know. So, you know, when it comes to our art, we really shouldn't give that much concern or worry to what other people think, because we'll be wrong about what we think they're thinking. You know what I mean? So another question then that people would be asking me is, they say starting's not too much trouble, because yeah, we just splash a bit of paint on there like that. But knowing where you're heading is. So that's why those scrapbooks and those sketchbooks, or those scrappy sketchbooks, come in. So what I'm putting on here on top of the white is that colour I was referring you to earlier, the Prussian blue. So this is done with Prussian blue as well. So it's just a Prussian blue, white and gold painting at the moment. So I've just got a little pointy brush, technical term. I tend to like flat brushes, but I was really lucky recently, and Jackson sent me to test some of these black Procryl by Jackson's, and I must say I'm quite liking them. They're nice and springy, and I don't usually use one of these pointy ones, like I said, but I've been using it sort of flat on like that. There. Did you see I just got a tiny bit of paint there on it? And as I said, I don't like to put paint out, even on wet palettes, because I always end up throwing it away, or it mixes a colour that I don't want. I prefer to mix it directly on here. Now, what I've got going on there is a little run, so I'm just going to rub that with my finger, because I don't want it running onto the white. But if it did, I wouldn't be too worried, because I could just paint over it. So I'm putting that on flat down, the brush flat on like that. And just rubbing it on. And I'm bearing in mind that I've not really defined a light source, but with any object. Where did I get that from? How do you get red paint when you're working with blue? Apart from when you've spilt a load on the desk. Oops. That's me. There's me talking about not wanting to put paint out because I'm wasting it. Oh, I love to have a red painting. I don't like red paint much. I'll use it a little bit in mixing, but generally, no, I won't be using that. So different colours have very different connotations, don't they? Okay. Let's get a bit of white in there as well. Looking at that sketch. A little bit of white onto my brush there. So I just tend to leave these stood, you know, like that. Those two colours that I'm working with. Just put a little bit on my brush and to use it. Ah, that feels so good. When you've got a pumice ground on there, it makes it slightly absorbent, almost like very, very, very fine sandpaper, almost like that. And if you put your paint on quite thin, as I have, it reacts in a more watercolour way to it, and you get a very interesting effect. So I've just washed that brush off there and wiped it on the paper towel. A bit more of the Prussian blue in there. Just going to scrub that in underneath as a little bit of shadow. Just want to start making that a bit darker. Yeah. Right, I'll need that to dry again, so I'll hair dry it. So yeah, you know, there's, as I was saying about the dual thing of having your sketchbook, if that's what you like to do, and your scrapbook there that I showed you that helps you identify what it is that really interests you artistically. Pulling those two things together can really help you start to define your style and work on that. And that's something as well that we look at in the workshops. So yeah, let's just dry this off. This is the best technology yet. Over there. Right, I just want to show you a little close up. Okay, because you can't see from there. So, can you see at all now the texture that we've got in here and how the paint's reacting differently? It's flowing into some of the texture. Yeah. And this is giving a real interesting, yeah, moule, you know, the moule shell effect there. I'll get into that now and add a little bit of detail to suggest even more of a shell shape. But, you know, that random underpainting is doing the work by itself, isn't it? All I've got to do now is put a rough, a naive sort of design for the moules and the plate. You know, I don't need much in the background at all. What I'm interested in saying in this picture, and this is a key thing, when people say, you know, starting's not a problem, continuing's not a problem, but knowing where you're going and how to finish it is the problem. Well, what you need to rely on is your sketches and what you need to have in your mind after you've had that playfulness of the painting to start with, what it is that you actually want to say. What is it that made you in that moment want to either take that photograph or do that sketch? What is it that really interests you, you know? And that's the thing as well, that when we're talking about that middle section of the pyramid, about being a professional artist, a selling artist, is, you know, when you get to be able to put on paint what it is that's really interested you about this, that's your unique vision, that's your unique view, and that's what people are going to be attracted to. That's what attracts hopefully attracts art buyers and people who are interested in your work is that, you know, they're seeing your unique voice there. So it's great when you're learning to, you know, learn from how other people have done things and how they've put their paintings together, but always try and put your unique voice in there. What is it that actually inspires you? What is it that you want to say about that painting? Right, I'm looking for now then that brush again, not the red paint. Oh, I've got to show you this. Red paint's not my favorite, like I just said, yeah. And I also said about how careful I am with paint and how much I like to not put it out, right? Well, this happened while I was painting here. Look. Ah. That's a bit too much red paint there. And it's just everywhere. Oh, hey Steve, thank you. Nice to see you. That's really kind. Yeah, I'm sort of working in both styles at the moment, and whether one is influencing the other, certainly the more abstract stuff is influencing the more naive stuff. But you know, then there's works like this that just sort of start to happen. This is I'm just going to put in another one of those molds. Let's just grab a little bit of chalk to make sure we get it in the right place. Yeah. Because obviously the positioning of these is going to be quite important. It's quite nice when you've got something like this, like the edge there of a plate, you know, and you're going to have a bit of the lemon's going to go onto it, is to have it, I'm trying to use the chalk colour you might see, I don't know, have it overlapping there. If I did put the lemon sort of in there like that, it would be lost, you know, it wouldn't be as exciting as this bit that actually sticks out and intersects those two lines. So that's what I'm doing it. Quite often I do a little sketch like this and then I'll amaze myself. How did I do that in 5 minutes? How did I simply make that look so good? When I'm trying to think about it too much, it's a lot harder. So what I'm going to do is actually outline that shape there in the blue. Because blue and yellow, they're colours on the colour wheel that are almost complementary. I always use a colour wheel when I am finishing a painting more than planning it, because sometimes by using a colour wheel and then applying a complementary colour scheme or a triadic colour scheme or analogous colour scheme, it can really help just pull it together. Look at me, I've injured myself, it's paint on this. So I've got a yellow here, which I'm going to be using for that, and then I've got a very much a blue here for that, which suggests then I could go and I could use a triadic colour scheme, which means actually including a little bit of red. It's funny then, the red's going to creep in, whatever. So triadic colour scheme is the 3 colours that are equally spaced around the colour wheel. I'm not going to go into colour schemes at the moment because it's a whole different ball game. The easiest one and the most effective one to use is a complementary, an exact opposite, you know, and that's going to be, that would be very powerful. So with this, because I've got more, this is quite a dark blue, I can use, if I keep that a yellowy orange, it will be quite a nice contrast. See, the gold's already quite a yellowy orange there. Let's see some. So if I put a yellowy orange into that, that's going to be quite nice. Let me just find one of them. So I was saying earlier, when you get to know how to use the acrylic paints, you'll know how to put them on. And I've put this is a dairy-lyed yellow, so it's quite a golden yellow, a golden coloured yellow. I've put that on to that blue while the blue's still quite wet, and I wanted to do that because that part of the lemon is in shadow, so I'm using the blue as an outline, but it's mixing in a little bit with that yellow, so it gives it a shadow without me even having to work on it or think about it. And you can see here that I've put that line where I didn't actually want it, that blue line going across there. So I could either rub that off if it was wet, but it's not, it's dry, so I'm just going to paint over it with white. And this is the really, really lovely thing about acrylic paints, especially for anybody who's beginning, or even, you know, for people who are quite experienced, is that you're never going to make a mistake with them, because you should always be very brave. You're never going to make a mistake because you can always just paint over it. And the worst thing that can happen, as with this painting in the background, is that it becomes a blank canvas, whether it's a blue blank canvas or you paint over it white. Again, you know, you just continual refinement. Just paint over the bits that you don't like and leave the bits that you do. So, and if you're using an opaque paint like this, whites, as I said, you know, or any of the earth colors are all going to be very opaque. You're just going to give yourself more interest, more build up of layers, and on it goes, on it goes. So, you know, when I said how important it is to have the sofa there and to be able to stand up and step back from your painting, you've got to keep being able to step back from it so you can review it and you can go back to it and you can think, well, I just need to move that there. And it's entirely possible, like with fuzzy felt. So yeah, fuzzy felt. So I think I'm just about done here. I'm going to, you know, put those other mules on there. I'm going to have a plate full of mules there and the moonlight. So it's been lovely just picking up this sketchbook tonight, which I really haven't seen. This is from 2015, 2014. Look at that, full moon mules. I just see that earlier tonight when I just opened this to show you guys. Wow, what a nice painting. And then I had this blankish canvas there. And then I opened it at that page and I thought, synchronicity, how does that even happen? It's kind of, you just got to be open to this kind of thing. So I'm going to say now, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a delight to welcome you into my studio and to know there's people engaged and interested out there. I'm always really happy to answer any questions from people who are interested in art, in, you know, my paintings, or in learning. This year, as I said, it's 10 years since I've been doing the Creative Me workshops. And out of the Creative Me workshops now have come the Artist Development Program workshops. And they are online, which is great. It's sort of with me in the studio for 6 weeks like this, but very interactive and in a variety of interactive platforms. So we actually get to learn together in the studio. So keep an eye out from that, because the next one of those, I think, is 6 weeks it lasts for, and it's starting on the 15th of March. Also in March, for you other guys who are interested in art and seeing it and can get here, this studio and gallery is open again. First weekend in March we'll be open, and we're open all summer then, Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays. And I'd love to see you if you're in the area, and of course children more than welcome, as are dogs. Talking of which, I better go and see my boy and feed him his dinner. I just want to say again, just checking out any comments there. Big thank you to you all for joining in. I will put this painting probably back there with all the other 20, and it'll be in my mind and I'll get on with it. And you may see it online at some point. I'm going to say to you all, have a really good evening. Thank you again for joining. If you've got any questions following this, please pop them up. I'll keep an eye on the page tonight. Thanks again. See you later. Bye.